Well, hi, everyone. Nancy just came in late, but now we can start because she's here. And I just want to welcome all of you, and we have this very special day that is another in our series that we're calling the Member Spotlight. And again, this is an idea I had as I learned the stories of you people. We have it's like every person in our church. If I were a university student, I could get a PhD just by learning the stories of everyone in this church. And it's a remarkable congregation that we have, and it's just a wonderful opportunity that we have to hear some of the stories that constitute the life of our congregation. Let's have a word of prayer together. Thank you, O Lord, how you bless us through the ages, how our lives, our families, many of them tap all the way back beyond Europe into the Middle East where your son was raised from the grave. Lord God, we thank you for gathering us together. We thank you for the great legacy that you have shared with us through those who've gone before us, that great cloud of witnesses. And we thank you especially for the Allyn family and all they have to share about their life and ministry together. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you very much. Will you guys please come up and join me up here? We're bringing up first Dawn Allyn, who is Lou's wife. Lou, are you going to sit whatever is the comfortable? It's good. That's good.
How many years
We're
older do you think Lou is than me? Great-grandfather, 0 for me.
Well, I invite you to sit down. I want to introduce you.
A week ago, he was on the operating table, and they went in his skull and put a cochlear implant in. Yeah. And here he is standing. It's amazing. The guy that old.
Well, I'll tell you, this is a wonderful way to start out because this is an amazing family. To all of you who are online with us as well as here, we have there's been loads of fun working with them, number one. Number two, you can always expect the unexpected. And we are very, very grateful to have all of you with us and to have this wonderful family. In the current April edition of the Gulf Breeze, we have featured them and basically said the Allyn family from Skaneateles to Naples, living the American dream. And they have been living the American dream, and they have been giving to their communities in both places. They're going to go through a history of their family, their grandfather, their father, a history of families with only one child. And their father said, we can't have another family that has only one child, and told them as much of how he felt about it, that they have produced, between these and their sister, I counted, you'll see the picture of the whole crew of the next generation of children and grandchildren, kids and grandkids, 26 of them. And Dawn has just said that, they're just had another couple of marriages and another grandson born. So it's almost, it could be 30 at this point. But I was amazed going from tiny family to that. But not only do they have a legacy of bringing this much love through their family, they have brought a legacy themselves in the communities that they have lived in. And both Naples and Skaneateles have benefited greatly from the Allyn family for their tremendous philanthropy and their innovation in their company, the Welch Allyn, which you're going to hear about. And you can see that there's stuff here on the table. This is much different than any, and it's wonderful, Bill, that you brought these things, to give you a sense of the technological development that occurred and how they are really the epitome of the model of capitalism in our country as a private company that has just done so well on an international basis. I present to you Don, Bill, and Lou. Thank you.
I think we can leave now,
You-
because
you-
you gave us the whole speech.
No.
Should probably add that we all listened to my father very carefully and delivered on his message of 30 kids and a couple of twins and adopted boy and a great grandson. So he'd be happy, and so the legacy goes on, fortunately. So Bill, take it over.
He was very serious about having more than one child. My mother gave me a diamond for Christmas, and I didn't know what it was for. This ear, that ear, my nose, my tongue. No, give it to pennies, stupid. But you have to have more than one child. You'll see that we accomplished that. Okay, let's move right along. The Allyn family came to the United States in 1632 and settled in Boston. Then they went down to Hartford, Connecticut, where they were quite involved with the Constitution down there. It was signed by one of the Allyns. And there's a house that was built down there, the first brick house, at least in Connecticut, maybe everywhere, because they went down, the English ships would come in with brick in their hold to keep the ships upright. And then they'd empty it on the dock and put all the goods in. And one of the great-great-grandfathers took all that brick and made a brick house that is still standing in Hartford, Connecticut. It's pretty neat. From there, they went up to near Utica, New York. And let's try one more slide. There's grandfather, our grandmother, and my dad on a rock that is still there on the lake. And that's a great picture. Lou, what is that white stuff? Can you remember that? I'm pretty sure it's not Naples beach sand. What do you think that stuff is?
It's still snowing up there today, I've been told, so.
It was 82 days ago and it's snowing today. So that's my granddad, our granddad, me, and Lou holding onto a fishing pole or something. And that's granddad in his office. And you see that thing that looks like a long tube in front of him near his right hand? That's what they call a rigid sigmoidoscope. And if anybody falls asleep, we're going to come after you with that rigid sigmoidoscope. And I'll guarantee you won't sleep again tonight. Next, please. Okay. Grandfather Allyn on the left, our dad on the next over. I guess that's Lou being held by my granddad and my maternal grandmother, her husband, Dr. Lou Finch, for whom Lou was named. And that, I think, is me and my mother standing behind. Okay. Mother and father. Dad was a really great guy, as was my mother. My mother was a great stay-at-home mom and just kept us going all the time. Dad would be out selling products. They'd take a DC-3 from Syracuse and fly to the West Coast, puddle hopping all the way across the country, and Lou can tell you more about that. Okay, that's our sister in between. And we didn't think too much of a new person in the family. We tried to get a bargain going with the next door neighbor who had an extra goat. So do you remember that, Lou? Was that your idea to trade her for a goat? Was that your idea to trade Elsa for a goat?
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good deal, but it didn't work.
Somehow our parents objected. Okay, and going way, way back, Skaneateles, it's still a tiny little village. But the big thing was Sunday baseball. Grandfather would go out and try to get all the good baseball players he could find, and he'd go to Syracuse and get some professionals to sort of salt the local team. And the people come out in a throng. Can you see the poles down there with people standing on top of the poles right behind the car? Oh, that's not a totem pole. Those are real people standing on poles. And to the right was a wooden grandstand. I remember Lou and I would go down there after a game looking for quarters, nickels, dimes, anything that fell out of anybody's pockets. You always got the most of that money, weren't
Looks like snow on the ground to me.
Well, it usually melts by the 4th of July, but you never know. Let's try one more. Our father went to Dartmouth College, loved ice hockey. He was a good athlete, great athlete. And there he is in his outfit. Lou and Don, Bill and Penny. Okay, in Skaneateles, we got involved in what we call the Skaneateles Community Center. It's a great recreation center, fitness center, 2 sheets of ice, pools, gym, workout area, and this is just a celebration of that. Okay, now this is the proof. The dad's words were taken to heart. So that's part of the mob. This Lou's mob, just Lou's group. Down on the Naples Beach, that's my son's next. You're going to hear from Scott way on the right. Next to him is David. Okay, that's Penny's. One of her big loves is tennis. And she had a big racket, as you can see. And I still have the scars on my head. Okay. One of the neat things about living in upstate New York, every 2 or 3 years, we get a high, Canadian high, comes in, that beautiful blue sky and very cold. The lake freezes over, and there's nothing as enjoyable as skating on that lake. And the ice is just like glass, there's no resistance. And that's our son David with 2 of his girls. Okay. Ooh, tire technical. What is that?
Keep it rolling, you're on a roll.
Okay. Well, now we're going to switch to a little more about the company. Now we're going to switch to a little more about the company. No microphone. No microphone. Am I doing something wrong?
Wanna try that? Try this.
How about this one? Yes. Okay. So we started in Auburn, New York, in a garage, and then my grandfather bought a building, a brick building. And in that building were 4 or 5 companies. It was my dad's first job was to collect the rent from the other tenants. There was a company that made aspirin, another one made spark plugs, another one made spark plugs.
Sorry about that. Kurt, sorry about that.
They made spark plugs and pianos and aspirin. And he'd have to go every month to collect the rent, and that was a tough thing to do. But can you imagine being in a building making spark plugs, pianos, medical instruments? How they did it. Anyway, sold that plant, moved over here to an old woolen mill, and it's belching coal. So the first thing we did, we took the boilers out and put gas furnaces in there. You see the water stand behind that? Behind the building? Lou's favorite thing was going up that water stand on the supports. All the way to the top. Lou, how was the view from up there?
Scary. Very scary.
And we found out that water pipe, which was supposed to bring water down if there was a fire, was full of mud. There's no way that any water is going anywhere, so we took that down. Okay, that's that same plant, but from the front. And we added on to it a number of times. It was woolen, all types of woolen products. There was, you go in the building, there was wool on the walls everywhere. Sorry about that. This is the Skaneateles woolen mills that we bought, added on to. And in the old days, you'd go in there and there'd be wool hanging on the walls everywhere and lanolin in the floors. If the place ever caught on fire, it never would have stopped. Okay, that's the newest building we built in 1980, Lou? Yeah, 1980. And it's close. That's another view of it after a couple of additions. That's the Skaneateles now, and that's the new building. We had a 100th anniversary. The company was started in 1915 by grandfather Allyn and Dr. Welch, hence Welch Allyn. And the next one, please. Oh, we're big in quality. That's our quality circle, taken by a helicopter. Helicopter was built by one of our engineers, and he went up there and took the picture. And he safely came back. I'm not too sure who that guy is. I went down to see the green flash, but I saw Kurt instead, who had just baptized one of his grandchildren. That is affectionately known as Jack the Ripper. We all had German Shepherds. I think we're on our 7th now. He was the only exception that we had, the German Shepherds. That dog was a character. He loved to entertain. So you can see he's got a little raft there. Some of you may have seen it when we had parties down at our house. He'd go get that little raft and put it in the pool and then swim. Go out to the middle. You ever seen a dog do a backstroke? Neither have I. Next, please. Oh, and this scared me one morning. That looks like a what? Polar bear up in the tree in Skaneateles. I don't know who did that, but I think it's fabulous. Okay, moving right along. Oh, that's the end. That's the end for a while. Okay, so how'd the company start, Lou?
Go ahead. What was your question?
How did the company start? How did it start?
How did they, I'm sorry.
I'll say, I'm sorry, Lou had this cochlear implant and he really has trouble, but he's going to be, in 3 weeks, he's going to be great, right? 3 weeks, you're going to be.
3 weeks will be turned on, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah. He's got all this stuff in his head, but they can't turn it on yet. So, grandfather, William Noah Allyn, grew up and he lived to the east of Syracuse. And the canal between Albany and Buffalo went right on through, and once they got to Buffalo, they get in the Great Lakes. So what did grandfather do, Lou?
This was the Erie Canal, and it was a big thing in that time when he was a youngster. And so he wanted, for his entertainment, he had to do something because of a very poor family, and he would go down by the canal, and he learned all the commands from the mule drivers, and so he would hide in the bushes, and when the mules would go by pulling the boats, he would start shouting out all the commands to the mules. And the mules would start turning around and doing all kinds of things and getting everybody upset. And then he would probably take off, run as fast as he could. But that was his entertainment. Pretty simple, but probably a lot of fun, I imagine. And one of the interesting things that he said, I can remember vividly, he said that his family was poor. And he said he was not able to go to school very long because he had to go out and put some bread on the table for the family. But he said our next door neighbor was dirt poor, and his name was Henry Kaiser.
Henry
So I'd
J.
say Henry
Tyson.
made out pretty well in his lifetime and did very well with all the manufacturing he got into, particularly in California.
Yep.
So that was some of his early years, and eventually he moved on to a company in Rochester by the name of ESI, Electrosurgical Instruments, which is the biggest manufacturer of medical instruments of its kind in the country. And so there he learned when he was young mechanical things, and he had a real flair for that. And he was also very creative. And so he worked for ESI for several years, and then as a mechanic, as a machinist, such as it was at that time, and then because everything was pretty much done by hand. And then he said, I would like to sell. And he had a real charm about him. And they agreed to let him go out on the road, which he did, and he did very well on the road. And during that time, he met with a Dr. Welch, who was working for the same company. And my granddad had some ideas for illuminating diagnostic instruments. At that time, the only way they illuminated it was to have a candle, a mirror, like a head mirror. You've probably seen the head mirrors. And get the reflected light off the head mirror to go in one of your body cavities somewhere. Not an easy thing to do. And so you're lining everything up. And then if you're into the optical side of it, you had to have the optics in there as well. So it was a real challenge. So he had an idea. At this time, batteries were coming out of the market, and he had the idea that you could put a miniature lamp, which they made, and connect the two and shine a light directly into the body cavity. And his first instrument which is what we call an ophthalmoscope, which has a light coming out of it, and much the same today as it was way back then, and just improved many areas of it, but still it's taking a light, shining it into the back of your eye, and you have 23 lenses to look through, and with those lenses you can focus at any point you want in the eye. And that was very important because now you had an instrument that was easier to use and would be used because it was easier to use. And it was a very important diagnostic procedure because your eye is really the window to your physical health. And doctor looking at what they call the eye grounds in the back of your eyes, and arteries, veins, and nerves. And it's the only place in your body where you can see arteries, veins, and nerves in their raw state. So depending on that, you can tell all kinds of diseases from hypertension to diabetes to social diseases. All these things show up in the back of the eye, and it's almost an instant diagnostic procedure, no cutting, no drugs, just look in the back of the eye and you can see these things. So,
Real quick, stop there for just a second. Come on, Annette. Trust me.
Where am I supposed to go?
Just like I'm your friendly doctor.
Oh, boy.
This is an ophthalmoscope. Looks in the back of the eye. It's loose at those arteries, veins, and nerves. And it's really incredible. Nothing the doctor has to tell him as much about the patient's condition as this thing. So I'm going to look. Oh, boy, look at that. Wow, you got a severe case of margarititis.
Charge it if I were you. So from that relationship, that Dr. Welch knew optics. He knew what had to be done to be able to see what they needed to see, and they formed a relationship, and then they went out and started their own business. And unfortunately, Dr. Welch died before the company got started, and in order to carry, there are no more Welches. He was the end of the lines. So when it came to naming the company, to carry the name on, he named it Welch Allyn. So there are no Welches in the business today, but there were a lot of Allens running around, as you can see. So my granddad carried on the business, and as you could see,
That was 1915.
right, 1915 when it started. And as you could tell by this photograph, he had a very strong, prominent chin, and that served him well. He was a tough guy, and he was a determined guy. He was very creative, and the business started off. And then, where do you want to go from there to the next the next stage, or?
Tell the story, tell the story of Chicago when he went to his first.
Okay, yeah, this is an interesting story.
How was he selling?
Got a little out of date, yeah. So he would, in those days, he loved the inside part of it, but he really loved to sell. He loved to be on the road. He loved to be talking to doctors and customers. So at that time, when the company was just getting started, and at that time he had no money, but he had some sample instruments, and he got on a train and went to Chicago, where they had what they call the American Medical Association, which still exists today. It's a big organization, very influential. And so he got in the exhibit hall. It was a week-long exhibit, and he didn't have any money, so he couldn't have an exhibit. So he thought, well, I have an idea. He got the porter to put up a card table like this on the way to the men's room. And he figured during the course of that week, he's probably going to see every doctor on his way to the men's room. So that he did well there, and he was getting some orders. And just outside the hallway to the men's room, there was a big exhibit by the name of the A.S. Allyn Company, which was the nation's largest at the time. And the A.S. Allyn Company didn't like the fact that this guy's got a little stand set up outside the men's room, and he's selling products that's their business. And he didn't pay anything, and they paid a lot of money probably for the exhibit. They weren't happy about it. So my granddad got the message that they weren't very happy. They're going to throw him out. So he went out and laid on his best salesmanship and told them that what he was all about, showed them his instruments, and by the end of the whole conversation, he sold them all of his samples and took an order for about $1,000, and A.S. Allyn Company became his first distributor. So, things worked out extremely well for him, and at that point, the company was really launched and got into developing other products besides the ophthalmoscope and the otoscope to look in the ear. So it was exciting times, and a lot of bumpy roads from that point forward, including the war years, but that's how it got its feet on the ground.
Talking about getting your feet on the ground, Lou and I were salesmen number 3 and 4. Right? Chuck Evans and George Blowers ahead of us. The deal was then you had to have one of these products used on you. Well, one product you don't have used on you, well, you do, you probably have, is called a laryngoscope. It goes the back of the throat and opens up the glottis and the epiglottis, and they put a tube down into your throat, down in your windpipe, yeah. By then, you've had a shot of sodium pentothal, so you're out of it, you don't know what's going on. So Lou and I were invited over to the hospital to see the anesthesiologist use a laryngoscope. And I remember over there were glass walls, partitions between each of the operating rooms. So over there, somebody's opened up, and you can see all the insides. Oh, I thought I'd pass out, but that was sort of interesting. There was something going on over here, but I can't remember what it was. But our surgeon came in, the anesthesiologist came in, and all I remember is they took a wire and went across this lady's throat like this. And the doctor, there's a white mark left. It took the scalpel and phew. I passed out. I'm on the floor. I'm crawling to the men's room. Lou is 1/2 a nanosecond behind me. The Allens made a great impression on the house.
I went in the locker room because we had gowned up. I went in the locker room. He's got his head between his legs. And I was very soon right next to him, my head between my legs. And that was a good experience, but you probably some of you have had major surgery where they've had anesthesia, and you came out with a sore throat. Wondered why in the world when I had a sore throat when they were operated on my knee. That's the reason. They
This
were a little
lighted
rough
crowbar.
a little rough putting that tube down, and that's for a child right there,
Yeah,
or a baby. So they get pretty long. So it's like a crowbar, really, with a light on it, of course. Everything that we made at that point had a light on it.
Everything. If it didn't have a light on it, it wasn't worth making. So we had the otoscope, the thymoscope, the financial, started the company by going to Chicago. Now we're into the recession. And my dad went to college, graduated with a degree in English. No?
Oh, go ahead. No, no. I thought optometry, your father.
No. You're giving away the punchline here. I went to Dartmouth, got a degree in English. I wouldn't have something as sensible as... Anyway, grandfather didn't need another person on the payroll. So he sent my dad to our dad to the University of Rochester to get a degree in optometry. And optometry is where you do get close to a patient, as I tried to do with Annette, but she moves too fast. But he learned all about optics. He learned how to prescribe glasses. And every Saturday morning, he would prescribe glasses to all of our employees, their spouses, and the children. And talk about a great way of getting to know your people that you're working with. And Louis did this for how many years?
Long time. Long time.
So he...
Practically his whole career, working career.
So Saturday mornings, where he really liked to be playing golf, but not only would he prescribe the glasses, but
He would, he would
get a discount.
do the test, prescribe them, get the glasses, and the people paid whatever he had to pay for the glasses, which is, if you have eyeglasses, you know there's a pretty good markup on those things. And he avoided all that for the employees, which was appreciated. So they got the employee, the spouse, the children, aunts and uncles. Every Saturday morning, he was in there examining eyes. So it was quite a
sight.
Interesting way for him to meet people.
So now World War II comes along, and most of the men in the company were drafted, and things looked pretty grim. So he went around to the restaurants that were closing. There was a big restaurant in Skaneateles by the name of Krebs. He got all those waitresses. He went to Auburn, got a lot of the clergy, he got a lot of the prison guards, but just did whatever had to be done. And there was a trolley that ran between Skaneateles and Auburn and Syracuse. And people, I don't know, back in that time they were taking the trolley or not, but anyway, they go back and forth. And he kept the business going by just grabbing anybody that wasn't gainfully employed or for the war. And because our big customer was the military. And our competitors were all making submarine sites or bomb sites or other things for the military, leaving this medical product to us. So now we go through 19...
Well, it was really a fortunate time for us because all of our competitors at the time were making other products for the war effort. And so it let us build what we had to build. And they told us, you will build diagnostic devices for the military. And so that was not a thing that, any question about it, you had to do it, and they did it. And as part of that, we had to be sure that we had the materials to build the instruments, and a lot of our materials were brass. And brass was, as you can imagine, in the military, was in high demand. And so we had someone assigned by the military, Army, to be sure that we got the brass that we needed. And that fellow's name was Charles Evans, and he was also, by training, a school teacher, a great teacher, and after the war, he was looking for a job, and he naturally came to see Welch Allyn, and my dad and he were very good friends, and Dad suggested maybe they go on a fishing trip way up in Canada, and I don't think Chuck had any interest in fishing at all, but he thought it would be a good experience. So they got in the car and they drove way up in the hinterland. And when the fishing trip had come to an end, they were going to be going back home, and someone in the group, not related to some family in the community, had a heart attack. And they didn't have a hospital there, and so things were pretty grim. My dad said, well, we'll get this man to the hospital. We'll go to Montreal. And so they got him in the car, and Chuck Evans was in the back seat with a lot of luggage and probably some fish and everything else. And off they went to the hospital in Montreal. They got the man there, and he lived to tell about the story. But the important thing was that Chuck Evans at that point decided this guy, Bill Allyn, is a pretty good guy. And this is if he represents a pretty good company that cares about people, and I'm going to hitch my wagon to that company. So at that point, he came on with Welch Allyn. He'd been on it his entire career, and he, in fact, retired in Naples. So that was a wonderful story. But his skill was not so much in the manufacturing or anything like that, but his skill was really working with our customers, and our customers were distributors who sold the product to hospitals, doctors, and wherever the instruments were needed. So he had a belief that for distributor salesmen to really be successful, they have to know about your product. They really have to understand it. They have to be enthusiastic about it. And he was a school teacher, so he put it all together. And he would go out to distributors, and he would light the fire in them, give them the information that they needed to be successful in their job, and it worked like a charm. And he is still remembered today, along with another fellow by the name of George Blowers, who, when Bill and I came in and had to get on a road to try to sell a product, every time we walk into one of those distributors, the first thing they say is, "Where's Evans? Where's Blowers?" Okay, they're not here. You're dealing with us now. Okay, so away we went. But it was an interesting road to follow. Those guys were really good. And my dad spent a lot of time on the road as well. He used to. I remember after New Year's, we'd drive to Syracuse. He'd get on the train, and he would head west with all his samples, and we wouldn't see him again until around Easter time. So he'd be out, and he'd usually stay in a YMCA because they were cheap, and he did a lot of traveling and a lot of selling for the company. And back in those days, they had what they call a drummer's table. Have you ever heard of a drummer's table? So drummer's tables were out in some of these more remote towns and whatnot. They had a hotel where salesmen used to stay typically, and they had a big dining room table set up in the hotel somewhere for all the salesmen. And at the end of the day, they would come in and I would guess had a cocktail and probably told a lot of lies about all the stuff they sold. But that was part of the life of the salesman. It must have been an interesting one. A lot of fun for them because they made a lot of good friends.
We'll see what we missed. We got on planes.
Well, yeah. So the technology changed a lot. The batteries improved from the old batteries that used to ooze out chemicals in your flashlight and ruin a flashlight, and they went into rechargeables, and all the lamps that we made got much smaller and much brighter, and the halogen lamps, and so each time a new technology came up, we were able to improve an instrument in one way or another. And then we kind of eventually shifted over to the electronic field. But one of my experiences when I was out on the road, I was told by Chuck Evans, who was my mentor, he said, go out to Grand Rapids, Michigan. Anybody here from Grand Rapids? Okay. Well, it's a pretty good medical town. And they had a clinic there by the name of Ferguson Clinic. And they do nothing but proctologic examinations and surgery and anything having to do with the colon and rectum. That was their specialty. And people would come from around the world to go to that clinic because it had such an excellent reputation. And Dr. Ferguson was the second generation in that clinic. And I was told to go see Doc Ferguson. So I got there in the morning and got gowned up, and we did a lot of examinations. And it's very interesting. But we had a brand new, what we call a sigmoidoscope, which is 25 centimeters long. Prior to that one, you had a light. The light was shining through the whole instrument. The doctor would be looking through here, patient out here somewhere. And it was kind of crude. It was like a pipe with a light in the end of it. But fiber optics came along, and we were able to put fiber optics inside that tube. So when it came out at the end, it had a perfect ring of light. It was stainless steel. It was beautiful. It had all the things on the doctors really needed. And
Sounds like
pardon me?
Sounds like you're in love with it.
I was in love with it. So anyhow, Dr. Ferguson was using it, and then we went to lunch, and we're talking, and in the middle of lunch, he looked at me and said, "Lou, you've had one of these examinations, haven't you?" And I said, "No, I'm a little young for that." He said, "You know, how can you sell these things if you haven't felt the steel?" And boy, I had a sinking feeling in a hurry. I knew I was in big trouble. So then he leans over to his nurse and said, "Set up another examination table." Then I knew I was in trouble. I said, "Wait a minute, I can't do that. I just had lunch. You can't do that." Doesn't matter. I work around all that stuff. So next thing I knew, I was up on the table and had that pipe sticking out of my rear end. But it was an experience I'll never forget. And I was a believer in it, a real believer in it after that. A very important instrument. Today, they're flexible. They can drive them up there like a big old Cadillac. But in those days, it was a piece of steel, and it was straight, and it was rigid, and it was cold. Oh, yeah. So every year, Dr. Ferguson would go to a different convention than the AMA. It was called the American Academy of Proctology. And we had an exhibit there, and he would typically come up the walkway towards our exhibit, and he'd have a $20 bill in his hand, and he'd get up in front of our exhibit and put it on the ground, and he'd look at me, he said, "I dare you to pick it up." A great guy, I really loved him. I should say,
There we go.
I should say one other thing before we leave here, because there's the other side of the team, I believe, was very, very important, and that was our mothers. And because I know my mother put up with a lot when my dad was away, because I got into a lot of trouble. And she always said, "You know, you'll be getting a good whooping when my dad gets back." And so by the time my dad got back, I kind of got things out of control. But she put up with a lot, and she had to run the household and look after a lot of things in the family to make things work right. And that didn't change at all. And my Dawn was the same way. She's raising a family, teaching school, and when I was away, I had no concerns about what was going on in the household. I knew that everything was being taken care of, and the children were being taken care of, and that's something that I couldn't replace.
A slightly different turn on that. Hello? Yeah. A slightly different turn on that. I was in the the Coast Guard out in Portland, Oregon. And we would go in ships out to Ocean Station, November, which is halfway between San Francisco and Hawaii. So if an airplane was going to crash, they would crash near us, and we'd go save everybody. It happened one time. I wasn't there, fortunately. But when these pilots would fly over, they knew we were out there to try to help them, so they were friendly to us and say, do you have a sweetheart or a wife back in the States? Because the next time back there, I was sending her a postcard. All you have to do is give me your name and address. Let's see, I'm thinking now. I'm out in the middle of the Pacific for 30 days, and this guy's got my wife's name and address. I don't think so. Anyway, let's go on. So everything Lou said, we had a lamp in it. And then we sort of got into some diversification. So when you go to the doctor's office, what are they always going to do? Take your blood pressure. Darn right. So we bought a company by the name of Taylor Instruments Tycos division. And it was a good product. It fit very well in with what we sell because we go to medical schools and try to sell the otoscope and thaumascope, and this was just a natural go with it. And they had a plant down in Asheville, North Carolina, which we loved. Great people down there, wonderful people. Then we bought a German company that did the same thing in Germany. This has been in a family, and the guy was just a jerk. Didn't clean the windows. Grease all over everything. You go down in the eating room, everything was filthy. He listened to everyone's phone conversation. He could pick up his phone and hear what Chris was saying to a customer or whatever. And then we got involved in what we call just-in-time manufacturing. We don't want to make anything that we're not going to use in a couple of weeks. He had years of inventory of pieces, little pieces. We threw them all out. He almost had a hemorrhage. We said, no longer are we going to do that. But we've got the best German tool makers in the world. They're not as good as a computer-controlled machine where we only need 20 pieces. We can make 20 pieces. Need another part, change the program, we'd make another part. That was really difficult for him to understand. Lou did our international work. So right after the war, we really got involved in international. We got involved in new products such as the blood pressure. And, if anybody feels at all dizzy, this is a defibrillator. If you pass out, we'll bring you right back. It's a shocking experience, but we'll do it. So I want Lou to talk a little bit about his international experience.
With that?
No, with anything.
Okay. I just added that defibrillator is probably a lawyer's dream. Yeah. You want to talk about lawsuits. Somebody dies and they had one of those used. Doesn't make any difference whose it is, you're going to get lawsuit.
Yeah, somebody's dead, and you try to revive them, and you fail.
But we stayed in the area of diagnostics, and the next step we got into was temperature. And you know, you have the old temperature device you stick under the tongue. They're all very, very good, but they're all slow, and sometimes they had problems with cross-contamination and whatnot. So we got involved with it, and we came up with a disposable. And this is an electronic one. You just put it in the ear for a second, and then click, it gives you the temperature instantly, and then you pop the little disposable part off. And this is the same thing that's hooked onto one of the wall units that has a disposable probe on it that, again, takes your temperature instantly. Nice thing about that business is it's a razor and razor blade business. You sell the razor, you make your money on the blades. And on this thing, you sell the device for what it really costs you to make it pretty much. And then you try to make up the profit. Make up the profits. Thank you. Not used to it. Make up the profits on the disposable element of the thing.
This disposable sheath goes on the more traditional thermometer. This is all electronic. And we had a machine that our people invented and built to make millions of these a day. So during the flu season, it's unbelievable. Just unbelievable how many of these go out the door.
I don't remember the number, but millions.
So here we are now. We're after World War II. We hired this guy, Chuck Evans, and he built a great sales team. No doubt about it. We had the best sales group in the United States. He also brought in a good engineer who was our fourth president, and he brought in so many things. He brought in fiber optics. Not the fibers that take communications across the country, but fibers that go maybe take the light 10 feet. That's all you can go in the body. So we got involved in fiber optics. It really revolutionized a lot of our products. And I'm going to mention dumb, blind luck a lot of times, but we had some dumb, blind luck that one of our engineers that lived next door to a manufacturer's rep who called on IBM down in Poughkeepsie. He heard the people in Poughkeepsie are having troubles with a fiber optic part. So the salesman told our engineer about it, and the engineer said, well, maybe we can help him. So we actually made some molds and went down, and sure enough, we completely solved their problem. And this is many years ago. This is the punch cards. I mean, how long are punch cards around? So we came back with an $800,000 order. And wow, I mean, that's still is an awful lot of money. So we said, my dad said, Bill, guess what? You're no longer in medical sales. You are in OEM sales. So we set up this OEM business, selling fiber optics and some of the lamps Lou mentioned. And we made the lamps for the 737s you pull down, lamps for blood analyzers, the Hubble space things got our lamps in it. It's a great business because they burn out sooner or later. Then LEDs came along. They pretty well put us out of the lamp business. But you have to keep inventing, or else you're going to get run over. We found that out many a time. Now, let's go on to. Okay, the latest thing is, and most of these instruments rely on the human eye to look through the instrument, but cameras are so tiny now, and so we're putting cameras in almost all of these products. So today, if I want to look at the net side to see if she has macular degeneration, I have this ophthalmoscope that looks in the back of the eye and take hundreds of pictures in a very short time, like just a couple of seconds, and then stitch them all together and make a complete back of the eye. Hit a button, it goes to an ophthalmologist who specializes in that particular disease. They make a decision, send it right back. And it's, wow, space age stuff. So that was very intriguing, and it took us in a whole new direction. And one goes back to these rectal instruments Lou loves so much. He mentioned this long one that's 6 feet, 7 feet long. And the doctor used to look at it like this through the scope, and they get terrible back aches after doing that all day long. So we came up with a scope that had a TV camera at the far end, the distal end. And the doctor's looking at a screen up here and not having to bend over. Let me come back. I'll come back to bend over, okay. He didn't have to bend over. So this was very revolutionary. The Number one company was Olympus. They made these scopes. They made the fiber optic scopes. They made darn good fiber optic scopes. Beautiful. Had probably 80% of the world business. Their name is Olympus. We wanted to be better than Olympus. Olympus is a mountain in Japan. We call our group Everest. The biggest mountain. Really made them mad. And then we got involved in industrial applications, so looking into a jet engine or a nuclear reactor or a pipe.
Nuclear reactors?
Nuclear reactors, yeah. And one of the favorite ones was this one, I'm sure it came from the CIA. You went into a pipe up and over and looked down from the ceiling. It had the camera in it, it had a little ear in it, so they could look around the room and see what was going on. A little spying going on, do you think? Anyway, it was fun. Remember the Harrier jets, the English jets? They had a severe problem, and some of the scopes we made were able to look at the potential problem. So they grounded all the Harrier jets all over the world. And man, we got a huge order, and we had to ship them out every day. It was, you never know what's going to happen. So we went to a nuclear facility. Remember, up in NIMO? We went to the NIMO nuclear plant. Don, you went.
No, I didn't, he can't hear you.
Remember when we went to the Niagara Mohawk nuclear plant?
Yep, yep.
We saw some of the stuff up there, and when you see it being used, it's pretty impressive.
A lot of applications that get vision in a remote place where they could actually steer that little snake into about any cavity or you name it, whatever the need was, you could get it there and you could visualize it on a big monitor, which was really quite a step forward. That ended up with the Japanese kind of stole our technology. And
Sort of. It cost them, though. We got them.
so we decided we were going to sue them, I guess. And Bill was behind us, not me. Because I was selling medical stuff. But anyhow,
He had the easy stuff.
It worked out. It worked out in a strange way. And the jury was going to be held in Syracuse, New York, in the middle of January. And the judge happened to be deeply involved with World War II in the Pacific. So we felt we had a pretty good thing going for us, and the whole thing was settled out of court. So that was a good outcome. The other thing that I feel is important, and this is Bill's idea, nobody thought much of it at the time that we started it, but once we got into it, everybody embraced it, and that was a total quality process. And when you think about quality, everybody say, yeah, we have quality. We do this, and we do really take care of doing it properly and everything else. But it's way beyond that. And this total quality process that Crosby, a fellow by the name of Crosby, started it. And when I told about Bill's idea, it was his idea to get involved with this. But part of the deal that people didn't love was we all had to go to school down in the middle of Florida in the middle of summer, and it was hot. But it was a terrific program where they really changed your whole outlook on how you deal with quality. It's not just a finished product, it's how you deal with the people, how you deal with your suppliers of materials, when somebody calls you on the phone, how you can tell them exactly when they're going to have that product. Not, well, we can't do it because supply chains or whatever. It was a total revolution of manufacturing in our company. And we were small. We were a small company. To do something like this, I thought was very visionary. And once people got into it, it didn't matter if you were sweeping the floors or what your top engineer, whatever it may be, you were involved with quality and you were committed to it. And once you saw the vision and understood what it was doing to transform manufacturing, you embraced it all the way. And I'll tell you, I can't think of any single thing in the company that was more impactful than our really getting into that quality process, because we used to say it's not a quality program, it's a quality process, and there is a difference. And what a difference it made. It was absolutely revolutionary for the company.
And Lou and I would take potential customers around the shop, and I would just go up to somebody who was working there and ask them what they were doing. And I'd previously trained them to say, you know, I'm doing something, it's important. Let me show you what I'm doing, and so forth. Be part of the sales department. So generally ask the production people, are you part of the sales department? No, no, yes you are. Yes you are. And it changed their attitude. They would, get out of the way, Bill, let me take over. You know, they were super. Lou, just one other quickie, and then we'll have to finish. So tell us about Dr. Bendover, would you?
Well, I don't know if there are any personnel people in here, but if they are, I won't tell the story. HR people didn't appreciate this one, but our salespeople had a lot of creative ways of making sales meetings, which can be very boring. They had a way of being very creative and making them interesting. And one of the things that we were selling with the sigmoidoscope, we had one of our sales guys, he's a natural-born comedian, but he would start out as, he would come in and he had a name of Dr. Bendover. And he would go on with this litany of all the Bendover families, like Stoopover, his cousin Stoop over, and I can't even remember them all. But it brought what could have been a kind of a boring meeting into one that when our customer salespeople came out of that meeting, they had a big smile on their face and they remembered Dr. Ben and they remembered Welch Allyn. And it was absolutely incredible. And how these guys continue to come up with these meetings, and we had some movies of it in our HR department, human resources department, got the movies and destroyed them because this could have us all in jail. But it was a lot of fun, and I really miss it. I thought it was a real addition to our company.
He still is a very special guy. What was it I was going to mention?
So I think we're where we need to be, and maybe if anybody has any questions.
Let me just finish.
Okay.
We have this fiber optics, and we had the lamps, and we got involved in barcode reading, and that was a really nice business. So our primary customer had lasers. Well, lasers are nice, but you drop them, and they don't work anymore. As ours, you get, literally, we'd go to meetings and hammer a nail into soft pine, but we'd hammer it in and wouldn't disturb the instrument at all. So we got a fair amount of business. And then again, lucky, we had an opportunity to get involved with these handheld computers that FedEx and UPS have. So we made these things for FedEx and UPS. We sold this company eventually to Honeywell. I miss it. It was so much fun. But we just had great people. Oh, boy, we had great people. Don, what do you want to say?
Well, you did hire great people, and that's what made the company, was the people, for sure.
Can't disagree with that. So any questions from the audience? Yes.
Who is running the company now?
I'm sorry?
You guys still run the company, or?
Who's running the company?
On the 100th anniversary, the family pretty much decided that they didn't want to go through what Lou and I went through. So we sold the company to a company that is in the hospital business. We were very strong in the doctor's office. This company was very strong in the hospital. They make beds, Hill-Rom beds. So that made some sense. They turned around and sold it to Baxter, huge company. So we are now part of Baxter. As of today, I haven't checked the computer, but maybe somebody else.
What was happening is the hospitals, in particular, didn't want to deal with a lot of company individual salesmen coming in and talking to them about their products. They wanted one person to come in that had a full bag of all the products, from beds to bedpans, and they would contract for a year or two or whatever years to do it. So it was really more of a business process than one of, you really need to buy this device because it's going to make a big difference in your hospital. It's going to make a big difference in the outcome of your patients. Or the quality of this product is superior to the quality of this one over here. They didn't care about that. They cared about bundling the products so that they had one contract to work with, and they could beat each other up on the price of that contract. And that's what happened. And it's still happening in a lot of, I don't know of any of the private companies that existed when we were in the business. I don't think any of them are private anymore. They've all felt this pressure. You know, it's too bad. I think it's too bad. I'd like to see some individual companies start up again. And
Maybe if Lou and I acted way back when, we would still have hair. But all that stress, it fell out a lot. Oh, gosh. Any other questions? So Baxter owns the medical company. Honeywell owns this business. And then we sold the
General Electric owns
General Electric bought the Everest, the flexible scope, because they are a big company for the General Electric engines, so it made sense. So here we are in Naples. Our grandfather moved down here in 1946. Why did he move down from beautiful sunny Skaneateles? Because it snows, it's gray. The winter is dismal. Gray, 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 gray. And summer comes with the 4th of July and leaves 1st of August.
Yeah, up in central New York, you have 11 months of winter and 1 month of poor sledding. That's it. And it's snowing there today, so I don't know.
So grandfather survived the war. I think he might have had a bit of a nervous breakdown. And went to see the doctor, and the doctor said, "Noah, you're going to die." Noah didn't want to die. What can I do? Let your son run the business. You get out of town. Get out of Dodge. Where would I go? Oh, what do you like? Well, I like to fish. Oh, why don't you go to Florida? Where would I go? Oh, look in a book. So I looked at the book. There's so many fish out here, they would jump in the boat. I mean, it was so crowded. He had a ball down here. So he bought this house, one house from the Gulf. He overpaid. He paid $11,000. $11,000. You still have the house in the family. And it's on 66 South 10th. It's an old wooden house. Wonderful place. So he came down, and then when he died, my parents came down, lived in that house. And for some reason, they wanted to be on the beach. They were just one house away, but there was a house way up on 6th Avenue North that was out literally on the beach. It was literally, I mean, violated all the zoning, not by a little, by a whole lot. So they bought that house. And it was up on wooden stilts, so the hurricanes came through. And, it's still there. Oh, no, it isn't. They sold it. It was knocked down. But then they moved down full time. And the head of our engineering was down here, and Chuck Evans was down here. So we had quite a well-challenged contingency down here. And they all had a great time. And so I want to thank everybody in Naples for making them comfortable. Really, they were just super happy. Now, some of you may, is there anything else you want to say?
Well, the only thing I thought was kind of neat when my granddad came down to do his fishing, the realtors that were here in town, I wouldn't expect there were many, were trying to sell him beach property. And he said, "You people are crazy." He said, "Nobody wants to buy beach property down here. There's nothing down here but mosquitoes and fish, and I'm here for the fish. I'm not interested in beach property." You can imagine, back then, what a deal.
And he had a fishing buddy by the name of Sample. And Mr. Sample bought some terrible land south of us now called Port Royal. And it was all marsh and mangroves. It was awful looking stuff. And he of course, developed. His grandfather came home one night and said, "Oh, poor Mr. Sample must have lost his mind. He was out there fishing. His brain got too hot and it melted because he bought this land. And what's he going to do?" So my granddad was a great medical maker, but no realtor. So many of you know Penny, and our oldest son, Scott, is an MD, writer of music. Not a great singer, but he put together this little tribute to Penny. There he is.
Click.
Click.
Take 49. Penny's World. El Mundo de Penny. We used to tease her about this sometimes. I want to tell you about a place that some of us lucky ones got to visit. Penny's World. A world where animals showed us the beauty and the sadness of life. Rescued baby raccoons that Mom released into the garage when summer was over, knowing full well that they would not return to us after the long, cold, skinny Atlas winter. The guinea pigs, eaten by my grandfather's hunting dog, Madel. The sea creatures, transported from Naples to Syracuse, broiling in the hot cabin of the airplane. The white, fluffy cat, dragged around the house by its neck by my little brother Mark. Ants. Ants crawling around in plastic transparent ant farms, escaping into our bedroom despite her best efforts. Cute little hamsters crushed unceremoniously beneath Penny's blue clogs. And of course, the German shepherds, too numerous to name, too numerous to count, and one Jack the Ripper. They all lived large. And finally, they left us. This is Penny's world. El Mundo de Penny. A world where animals show us the beauty and the sadness of life. 2, Penny's world. A place where anything can happen. Where even with lousy undergraduate grades, Scott, hard work and passion will get you into medical school, and now just stop complaining, thank you. Where a small town hick named Bill Allyn could somehow pull off nearly 60 years of loving marriage. Where skin can be scorched and broiled on the Naples beach and somehow glow with a youthful radiance some 50 years later. Where miracles are not sought after. They are simply present when you open your eyes and you keep them open. Where everything will be okay. Where friends are everywhere. Where hope is always. Where love is everything. This is Penny's world. El Mundo de Penny. A place where anything can happen. 3, Penny's world. Love. the only thing that really matters. The invisible subatomic force that holds us all together. The immediate and palpable thing that we all felt in her presence. There are a million beautiful smiles in the world, but it was a lot more than that. The absence of judgment, the acceptance of what is, and her radical and long-standing denial of fear. Mom was simply afraid of nothing.
Except bats.
The deep and abiding faith that supported her at all times, that was the foundation of her love. She was the love warrior in the service of her Lord, armed with a smile, never afraid. Love was Penny's prime mover, the reason for everything, the answer to every difficult question. And towards the end of her life, during one of our many ongoing theological discussions, she equated God with love, one and the same. The complexity of the divine distilled down into one clear, crystalline idea: love. The only thing that really matters. It was always the words of Paul the Apostle that invariably moved her. No big surprise there. She loved her husband. She loved her kids. She really loved her grandchildren. She loved her parents. She loved her sisters. And her ever-expanding family, with a stubborn certainty that we often took for granted. But her love could not be contained to a family. It walked with her into the world. And it was shared with her daughters who weren't her daughters, with the patients who lived another day because of Mom's countless apheresis sessions at the medical center, sitting for hours and hours as her blood was extracted and spun and separated into its constituent forms, with the least amongst us, those that today have a roof over their head and a safe place to raise their families because of Mom and Dad's participation with Habitat. And it just goes on and on. And everywhere I look today, it's so clear to me. Her love goes on in each one of us. This was Mom's true legacy. Everything eventually escapes us, even Penny. But love will never die. It cannot die. It will not die. The only thing that really matters. She was the love warrior. This is Penny's world. So I'm just going to close with a little prayer that Penny's mother, Gagi, taught me. O Lord, support us all the day long until the shadows lengthen and the evening comes and the busy world is hushed and the fever of life is over and our work is done. Then, in thy mercy, grant us rest. Grant us rest and a safe lodging and peace at the last. Amen.
Thank you, thank you. You got the right microphone? Can you hear me? This one works. I just want to say that, Penny loved this church, and Scott really did bring her spirit into the room with all of us. Thank you so much, you guys. You have been wonderful to work with, and we just appreciate the time you've spent with us, and thank you all for being here to honor this special family.
You.
No. I did nothing, I'll tell you. It's been lots of fun. But we're going to invite all of you to have sandwiches and a little bit of lunch back here in the back of the sanctuary. Thank you again.
Anybody wants a quick physical?
Not from Lou.
No trust, huh?